After a lifetime of being treated as the family's expendable daughter, I uncovered a secret inheritance hidden by my father, forcing me to decide whether vengeance or forgiveness would finally set me free. I never thought I'd walk through that front door again. The house still smelled like cedar polish and guilt, the same scent that clung to every childhood memory I've tried to bury. My brother Derek met me at the doorway with that same smirk he wore the day he convinced Dad I'd forged his signature on a report card. Some things never change. "Didn't expect you'd actually show up," he said, leaning against the frame like he owned the place. Maybe now he did. Dad's funeral was over, but the air was thick with all the words left unsaid. The guests had gone, leaving only family, if you could still call us that. Mom sat in the living room surrounded by framed photos of Derek's football trophies, pretending not to notice I'd arrived. I could feel her disappointment radiating like a low hum, as if my mere presence upset the symmetry of her grief. "I came for the will reading," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Nothing else." Derek chuckled. "You mean the inheritance you think you're owed?" There it was, the spark, the same one that used to send me running to my room when I was 10. But I wasn't 10 anymore. The family lawyer, Mr. Carmichael, cleared his throat from the dining room table, shuffling papers like they could protect him from the storm brewing between us. "We'll begin now, if everyone's ready." Ready, that word didn't belong here. Not in this house, not with these people. As he read through the clauses, I half listened. My father's words felt distant, boilerplate love mixed with careful distribution of assets. Derek got the house. Mom got the investments. My name came last, tied to a modest savings account and a vague mention of other considerations. "Other considerations?" I asked. Carmichael hesitated, glancing toward Mom, then Derek. "That portion isn't in this envelope. It appears there's a supplemental letter, one I don't have in my possession." Derek's smirk widened. Guess Dad finally realized who actually deserved something. I wanted to tell him about the nights I'd found Dad staring at the family photo in silence, the one where Derek's hand rested on my shoulder like ownership. But I said nothing. Instead, I turned toward the old bookshelf near the hallway. Behind it, the faint outline of dust marked where Dad used to keep his lockbox. It wasn't there anymore. Just an empty square, clean as if recently wiped. Something twisted in my chest. Dad wasn't a man of sentiment, but he was methodical. He wouldn't misplace a box like that. "Is there any chance the letter's missing?" I asked. Mom's eyes flickered. "You always were paranoid, Nora. Not everything's a mystery." But she wouldn't meet my gaze. That night, as Derek and Mom argued in the kitchen about selling the house, I walked upstairs. The carpet muffled my steps, the same beige trail that once led me to the attic where Dad stored the things Mom didn't approve of: war medals, tax files, secrets. If the letter existed, that's where it would be. I turned the brass handle and inhaled the faint scent of dust and tobacco. My father might have left me nothing on paper, but I could already feel that wasn't the whole story. The attic was colder than I remembered and emptier. Dad's old workbench sat beneath the skylight, covered in a fine layer of dust that looked almost deliberate, like someone had tried to erase him. Boxes lined the walls, labeled in his neat block handwriting. Taxes 2004-2009, TOOLS, charity FILES. None of them screamed hidden inheritance. But I wasn't looking for money. I was looking for something that felt like truth. I started with the drawers under the workbench. Receipts, screws, keys to locks long rusted. Then, under a folder marked Insurance, Do Not Toss, I found it, a small manila envelope sealed with wax. My father's initials were pressed into it, R.M.H., the same seal he'd used on every family Christmas card. My fingers shook when I cracked it open. Inside was a single folded letter and a USB drive. "To my daughter, Nora," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I've failed at what I always intended, to tell you this in person. I am not proud of the distance between us. You were never the mistake your mother said you were. If anything, you were the only one who saw clearly." My throat tightened. I hadn't expected regret from him, not after years of silence. The letter continued. The truth is, I left something meant for you alone. The lake cabin is yours, not Derek. The title is under a trust your mother insisted we close. I didn't. The documents are stored digitally. Don't trust what Carmichael reads. He's under pressure. Pressure? That word pulsed through my mind like a warning. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, the small screen casting pale light across the room. Inside the single folder titled ASHES were 3 files: a scanned will, a property deed, and an audio recording. I played the recording. My father's voice came through, lower and raspier than I remembered. Carmichael, keep it sealed until she asks. You know which she? They'll come for it once I'm gone. The attic suddenly felt too small, the walls too close. I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to the recording again and again. The cabin, the trust, the implication that my brother and mother had already tried to take it. Then the floor creaked behind me. I turned. Derek stood at the top of the stairs, hands in his pockets, face half hidden by the dim light. "What are you doing up here?" he asked, his voice too casual. I slid the letter into my jacket pocket before he noticed. Just cleaning up Dad's things. He stepped closer, scanning the bench. "You always were sentimental. You know Mom wants to start selling this junk, right?" "Right," I said, forcing a smile. But his eyes lingered on the laptop. For a second, his jaw tightened, like he already knew what I'd found. When he finally left, I locked the attic door behind him and leaned against it, my pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't know how far Derek or Mom would go to keep the truth buried. But I did know one thing. Dad had trusted me with a secret they couldn't afford for me to reveal. I'd visit the lake cabin myself. Whatever my father left there, it was time to bring it into the light. The road to the lake hadn't changed. Same cracked asphalt, same rows of skeletal birch trees leaning like quiet witnesses. I hadn't been here since I was 17, the night I left after one of Dad's fights with Mom had turned violent. He'd come to find me here the next morning, eyes swollen with shame, and said, "This place is for starting over." Now it was just me and the ghosts. The cabin appeared at the water's edge, smaller than I remembered but untouched by time. The porch light still worked when I flipped the switch, casting a warm halo over the wood. The air smelled of pine and burnt coffee, the scent of every childhood summer I once loved. Inside, the furniture was draped in sheets, like the house was holding its breath. A few family photos sat on the mantel, their glass dusty and warped. In one of them, Dad stood between Derek and me. Derek's arm was thrown over Dad's shoulder, mine hung awkwardly at my side. Even in the still frame, you could see who belonged and who didn't. I set my bag on the table and powered on my laptop. The USB drive still held the scanned deed, but I wanted to see it in person, to touch the proof. The place felt alive, like it knew why I was here. I searched under loose floorboards, behind framed photos, even inside the hollow of the old wood stove where Dad used to stash matches. Nothing. Then I noticed a faint draft near the hallway wall. The wooden panel there didn't sit flush, one edge stuck out slightly. I pressed on it, and it gave way with a soft click. Behind it was a narrow compartment, a hidden safe. The code came to me instantly, Dad's birthday, the same one engraved on his watch. It opened with a mechanical sigh. Inside were 2 things, a stack of documents bound with twine and another envelope bearing my name. "If you've made it this far," the letter began, "then you already know the truth. The cabin and everything tied to it is legally yours. But understand this, your mother and Derek won't let it go quietly. I made mistakes protecting them. Don't make the same ones." My chest tightened as I read the last line, handwritten in ink that had bled into the paper. "The ash tree behind the dock hides what's left of the past. Burn it if you want peace." I stepped outside, the sky dimming into copper and violet. The lake lay still, reflecting the last light of day. Behind the dock stood the lone ash tree, its roots tangled in the earth like secrets unwilling to die. I crouched by it and brushed away the leaves, metal scraped against my hand. A small tin box was buried beneath the soil. When I pried it open, there were photos inside, Mom and Derek, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Bank records, property transfers, my father's signature forged in black ink. The wind picked up, rustling the branches above me. I didn't need to read more to understand. My family hadn't just betrayed me, they'd stolen from him too. Somewhere between rage and grief, I realized this wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about justice. I packed the documents into my bag, watching the lake swallow the last of the sun. Tomorrow, I'd confront the lawyer, and this time I wouldn't come alone. Carmichael's office looked exactly as it had when I was 12, and waiting for my parents to sign the custody papers that never changed anything. Mahogany desk, dusty blinds, and that faint smell of paper ink and cowardice. He rose when I entered, all polite smiles and stiff posture. "Nora, I didn't expect to see you again so soon." I set my bag down and placed the manila folder on his desk. "You should have. You've been reading half-truths to my family, and I have the other half right here." He blinked. "I beg your pardon." I opened the folder and spread the papers across the polished wood, scans of the will, property deeds, and my father's audio recording, still playing faintly through my phone. Dad's voice filled the room. "Keep it sealed until she asks." Carmichael went pale. His eyes darted to the office door, then back to me. "You weren't supposed to find that." "So you admit it exists," I said. He rubbed his temples, his tones slipping into a weary confession. "Your father was complicated. He insisted on keeping multiple versions of the will. Your mother and Derek wanted everything consolidated. I had no choice but to lie." He sighed. "Compromise." I leaned forward. "Compromise doesn't include forging signatures or burying trust documents. I found the original deed, Carmichael. My name's on it. My father wanted the cabin to go to me." He hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a small black notebook. "He told me you'd come," he said quietly. "He even left notes in case things turned ugly. You should read them before doing anything drastic." Inside were dated entries, short and clipped like legal memos. March 5th, Evelyn and Derek demanding new version. Unethical. Refused to sign without Nora's consent. April 2nd, Evelyn sent friend from the bank. Suspicious withdrawals, must protect assets. I felt my stomach turn. My mother's name written in my father's hand, side by side with the proof I'd been afraid to believe. I stood, clutching the notebook. "I'm not here for revenge. I just want the truth recognized legally." Carmichael nodded, almost relieved. "Then I'll help you file a petition to reinstate the original will. But Nora, once this starts, your family will retaliate. They always do." I met his eyes. "Let them." As I gathered the papers, my phone buzzed with a message. "Derek, heard you're in town. We need to talk. Mom's sick." Sick, that word again. The same excuse used to control every moment of my childhood. Carmichael noticed the look on my face. "Don't go alone," he warned. "You have something they can't afford to lose." I left the office without responding. Outside, the air felt heavier, the city louder. I could almost hear my father's voice behind the static of passing traffic. "Don't make the same mistakes I did." Maybe it was too late for that. Maybe confronting them was exactly what I needed to stop running from the house. The will, the truth. I opened Derek's text again and typed a short reply. "Fine, tomorrow morning. The cabin." The next sunrise would bring more than a family reunion. It would bring a reckoning long overdue. Morning came dressed in fog. The lake was still, its surface a sheet of dull silver that reflected no sky, just the vague outline of the cabin. I'd arrived early, an hour before Derek was supposed to. Part of me hoped he wouldn't show. Another part wanted him to. I laid the documents across the kitchen table like playing cards. The will, the deed, the notebook. Proof of everything they'd stolen. Proof that I'd finally stopped being the invisible one. The crunch of tires on gravel cut through the silence. Moments later, Derek's car appeared, a dark shape through the mist. He stepped out without looking at me, his posture casual, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. "You picked a hell of a place to talk," he said. Mom's resting, by the way, not that you care. I ignored the bait. Dad left the cabin to me. You knew that, didn't you? He smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. You always were dramatic. Dad promised this place to me years ago. He wanted someone responsible to handle things. Responsible, I repeated. Like forging his signature, like draining his accounts while he was in hospice. The words landed like stones skipping across water, quick, sharp, unstoppable. Derek froze, then let out a humorless laugh. You really think you're some kind of detective? I don't think, I said, sliding the notebook toward him. I know. He flipped through it, pretending to read, though his eyes flickered to the door, calculating. You shouldn't have gone digging. You don't understand how complicated this family is. No, I said softly. I understand perfectly. I was the complication you all wanted to erase. Something in his face shifted, panic maybe, but it hardened just as quickly. He grabbed the notebook, tearing out a page. This means nothing, he hissed. Mom said. Mom said what? That I'd ruin everything by existing. His jaw clenched. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant cry of a loon over the lake. Then, without warning, Derek swept the documents off the table. Papers fluttered like startled birds. I didn't flinch, I just stared at him. Go ahead, I said. Destroy them, I have copies. That stopped him cold. His breath came out ragged, heavy. You're bluffing. I smiled for the first time. You've never been good at recognizing when I'm not. For the first time in my life, Derek looked small. Not the golden boy, not the family favorite, just a man caught in the truth he'd helped build. He turned toward the door, muttering something about calling Mom, but I cut him off. Tell her I'll be filing to reinstate the original will by Monday, and tell her I'm done being her charity project. He hesitated at the threshold, then said quietly, You're making a mistake, Nora. You think this ends with you winning something. It doesn't. It never does. I watched him drive off, gravel spitting beneath his tires, until the sound faded into the fog. When I looked back at the table, one page of the notebook had fallen to the floor. A new entry I hadn't read before. If anything happens, check the storage shed. She'll never look there. My pulse quickened. If she meant Mom, and I knew it did, the shed might hold more than proof. It might hold motive. The shed sat at the edge of the property, half swallowed by vines and years of neglect. The padlock was new. That alone told me everything I needed to know. My father's tools had rusted decades ago, but someone had been here recently. The morning fog still clung to the lake as I approached, the grass wet against my shoes. The closer I got, the more my gut tightened. I tried the door. Locked. But the wood around the latch was old, brittle. One shove with my shoulder and the hinge gave way with a metallic shriek that split the quiet. Inside, the smell hit first, oil, damp paper, and something faintly chemical. The air was colder, heavier. My father's old workbench stood in the corner, but the surface was clean, unnaturally so. On the floor sat 3 plastic storage bins stacked neatly, each labeled in my mother's handwriting. I lifted the lid off the top bin. Medical bills, dozens of them. Hospice statements, prescription receipts, transfers from my father's insurance. At first, it looked ordinary until I noticed the payee lines. Nearly half were made out not to the hospital, but to EM Holdings, LLC. EM, Evelyn Matthews, my mother. The next bin was worse. Ledgers, falsified donation receipts, consulting payments bearing Derek's signature. I could practically feel my father's voice whispering from the grave, don't make the same mistakes I did. But the third bin stopped me cold. Inside was a small black photo album and a sealed envelope marked confidential trust records. The album contained pictures I'd never seen, Mom with a man who wasn't my father. The same man from the forged property documents. In several shots, they stood in front of the cabin, smiling like co-owners. My pulse pounded in my ears as I tore open the envelope. The first page was a notarized transfer request, dated 6 months before Dad's death, attempting to move the cabin trust into the name EM Holdings. My father's signature had been copied, but the stroke pattern was wrong. sloppy, desperate. Behind the papers was a note, written in my father's unmistakable scrawl. If you found this, Nora, it means I ran out of time. She's been using my illness to funnel money through the trust. I left the originals with Carmichael, but don't trust him entirely. Protect yourself. A car door slammed outside. I froze, clutching the envelope. Nora, Mom's voice called out, sweet and careful, the same tone she used when she wanted obedience. I heard you were here, sweetheart. Derek said you were looking for something. Mind if I come in? My throat tightened. I stepped back, the boards creaking beneath me. You don't need to be here, Mom. Go home. Oh, honey, she said softly, her silhouette filling the doorway. Home is wherever the truth lives. You've just forgotten who built it for you. Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hands, and for a fraction of a second, the mask cracked, rage flashing through the composure. Why don't you give that to me? She said. You'll only hurt yourself digging through things that don't concern you. But it did concern me. It always had. I slipped the letter into my jacket and moved toward the back exit. If you want to stop me, you'll have to admit what you did. She didn't move, just watched me leave, her voice following like smoke. You think you can handle what he left behind? I didn't answer, because by the time I reached my car, I wasn't sure if she was threatening me or warning me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face in the shed doorway, calm, unblinking, predatory. By sunrise, the lake had frozen over, and so had whatever was left of my trust in her. I spread the contents of the envelope across my kitchen table. The forged documents, the photo of Mom with the stranger, my father's final note. The ink bled faintly from damp fingerprints. I hadn't realized how much my hands were shaking. If what I had was real, this wasn't just family greed. It was fraud, and maybe worse. Before I could decide what to do next, a car engine growled outside. I peeked through the blinds. A silver sedan idled by the mailbox. Derek. I grabbed the evidence, stuffed it into a manila envelope, and opened the door before he could knock. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. We need to talk, he said, voice low. Talk, I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. Mom's losing it, Nora. She's been burning papers, calling the lawyer nonstop. I think she knows you found something. I stayed silent. He looked past me toward the table. What did you find? Proof, I said simply, of what you both did. He winced, almost as if I'd slapped him. You think I had a choice? She said Dad wanted everything cleaned up before the estate hearing. I didn't know about the forgeries. Don't, I snapped. You signed the withdrawals, you helped her. He exhaled, jaw trembling. You don't get it. She's not the same, Nora. After Dad got sick, she started hearing things. Talking about protecting the legacy. She kept saying Dad was going to ruin us with his guilt. That stopped me. Guilt over what? He hesitated, glancing back toward the car. Ask her about Raymond Hale. The name hit like static, familiar but distant. My father's initials were RMH Raymond Matthew Hale. She always said he died, I said. Derek's voice cracked. He didn't, at least not when she said he did. A chill crawled up my spine. He took a step closer. You have to leave it alone, Nora. You don't know what she's capable of. Capable of what, Derek? He didn't answer. His phone buzzed, and the color drained from his face. Without another word, he turned and sprinted back to his car. Tires kicked up gravel as he sped down the road, leaving me in the wake of exhaust and confusion. I went back inside, heart hammering. Raymond Hale, my father's name, my mother's company. The pieces started connecting in ways that made my skin crawl. If she had been moving assets under his name after his supposed death, that meant the fraud ran deeper than inheritance. It was identity theft, maybe even murder. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I answered before thinking. A distorted male voice came through the line. You shouldn't have gone to the shed. Click, the call ended. For a long time, I just stood there listening to my own breathing. Then I looked back at the manila envelope. The only place left that might hold the full truth wasn't the cabin or the shed. It was wherever my mother kept her records. And I knew exactly where that was. Her office downtown, the one I'd been banned from my entire life, was waiting. And this time I wasn't coming quietly. The glass tower downtown loomed like a monument to every lie my mother had built. EM Holdings, the sign read in sleek chrome letters. Standing there, I finally understood what my father's note meant. She'd built her empire on the ashes. The lobby receptionist gave me a polite, corporate smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm her daughter," I said. "Evelyn Matthews." That was apparently enough. I was escorted up 24 floors to a hallway lined with abstract paintings, all blues and silvers, cold, immaculate, expensive. Her office door was open. Mom sat behind a glass desk, wearing the same pearl earring she'd worn to Dad's funeral. Her posture was perfect, her smile rehearsed. "You look tired, Nora. You should have called first." I shut the door behind me. "Would you have answered?" She didn't flinch. "That depends on whether this visit is about forgiveness or foolishness." I placed the manila envelope on her desk. "You already know what it's about." She glanced at it but didn't touch it. "You've been busy." I went to the cabin, the shed. "I know about Raymond Hale and the trust transfers. You used Dad's illness to rewrite his estate." She folded her hands. "You think you found truth. What you found was evidence taken out of context. Raymond Hale was never your father's secret. He was your father." For a moment, I thought I misheard her. She continued, voice soft and deliberate. "Before you were born, he changed his name after a tax investigation. It wasn't fraud, it was survival. Everything I've done since then was to keep what he built safe from collapsing again." I stared at her. "You forged his name after he died." She leaned back, expression unreadable. "To protect the legacy. The cabin, the accounts, I moved them under the company so creditors couldn't touch them. I did it for the family." "For the family?" I snapped. "You lied to everyone. You let Derek believe he deserved everything, and you buried Dad's wishes along with him." Something flickered in her eyes then, not guilt, but exhaustion. "You have no idea what it costs to keep a family intact. Your father didn't trust anyone, not me, not you. He was planning to dismantle everything we built." "Because you turned it into a lie," I said. Her smile vanished. "You're just like him, always mistaking morality for strength. But you'll learn sooner or later that power keeps the lights on, not virtue." I reached into my bag, pulling out a flash drive. "Maybe, but this keeps the truth on record." For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "What is that?" "Copies," I said, "of everything. Carmichael's already agreed to reopen the case." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're going to destroy this family." "No," I said quietly. "You did that years ago. I'm just turning the lights back on." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the desk. I half expected her to lunge across it. Instead, she simply exhaled and said, "Then I hope you're ready for what comes next." I turned to leave, pulse pounding in my ears. As I stepped into the elevator, I checked my phone. A new message from Carmichael. "Unknown number traced. Call me immediately." The doors closed before I could respond. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, I knew two things. Someone else was watching me, and this story wasn't ending with a court case. Carmichael's office lights were still on when I arrived, though the street outside was empty. It was nearly midnight. The glass door was ajar, the closed sign flipped backward. My gut told me to turn around, but curiosity or maybe stubbornness kept me walking forward. "Carmichael," I called softly. No answer. The reception area was dark except for a thin glow under his door. I pushed it open. His desk lamp flickered once, then steadied. Carmichael sat slumped in his chair, head bowed, papers scattered across the floor. For one wild second, I thought he'd fallen asleep until I saw the smear of red across his shirt. My stomach lurched. "Oh my God." He stirred faintly, coughed. "Nora." I knelt beside him, pressing my jacket against the wound. "What happened? Who did this?" His eyes darted to the corner of the desk where a flash drive lay next to a half-burned envelope. "They know," he whispered. "The files, you weren't supposed to keep them all in one place." "Who Carmichael? My mother." He shook his head weakly. "Not just her. EM Holdings isn't hers alone anymore. She brought in partners, real ones, dangerous ones." His voice cracked. "You have to go. Don't trust anyone from that company, not even the police." I could hear sirens somewhere far off, maybe approaching, maybe leaving. My hands were slick with blood. "Stay with me," I said, pressing harder. He smiled faintly, eyes glazing. "Your father tried to warn you too. The cabin wasn't the secret, you are." "What?" But the rest was swallowed by the rattle of his last breath. I stumbled backward, the air thick and metallic. A phone buzzed on the desk, his phone. A new text notification blinked from an unknown number. "Cleanup in progress. Package handled." My blood ran cold. Whoever had done this was still out there, and they thought Carmichael had destroyed the evidence. I grabbed the flash drive and the remaining papers, shoving them into my bag. As I headed for the door, movement in the glass reflection stopped me. Someone was standing outside in the hall. A tall figure, face shadowed beneath a hood. I ducked behind the filing cabinet, heart pounding. The door creaked open, slow and deliberate. Footsteps crossed the threshold, unhurried. I glimpsed the glint of something metallic, maybe a weapon, maybe just a flashlight. I waited until the footsteps reached Carmichael's desk, then bolted through the side exit that led to the stairwell. My footsteps echoed all the way down. Outside, the rain had started again. I didn't stop running until I reached the corner gas station 2 blocks away. My hands shook as I fished for my keys and phone. The first person I thought to call wasn't the police. It was Derek. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Nora," his voice was hoarse. "Carmichael's dead," I said. "They're after me now." Silence, then, "I told you to stop digging." "Derek, what did she drag you into?" He sighed low and broken. "It's too late to fix it. Mom's not in control anymore. They own her. They own everything." "Who?" I demanded. Before he could answer, a loud bang echoed on his end of the line, glass shattering, muffled shouting, and then the call dropped. I stood frozen, rain dripping from my hair onto the pavement, listening to the dead line hum in my ear. Somewhere behind me, a car engine revved. I didn't wait to find out who it was. If I wanted to survive long enough to finish what Dad started, I'd have to end this myself, tonight. The road back to the lake felt endless. Rain lashed the windshield in sheets, headlights slicing through the fog like blades. Every instinct told me to keep driving away from the cabin, away from this nightmare, but something deeper pulled me forward. My father's last words echoed in my head. "Don't make the same mistakes I did." By the time I reached the property, the storm had turned violent. The cabin windows glowed faintly through the rain. Someone was already there. I killed the engine and stepped out, clutching the bag to my chest. The flash drive, the documents, every piece of proof that tied my mother's empire to what they'd done. It all had to end here. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the fire was already burning in the hearth, throwing long shadows across the walls. And sitting in Dad's old chair, as calm as if she'd been expecting me, was my mother. She didn't look surprised. "You always did come running back to this place," she said. Her voice was soft, nearly drowned out by the storm. "Where, Derek?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to the flames. "He made his choices, we all do." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. "You hurt him." She shook her head slowly. "Not me. The people who cleaned up after Carmichael, they don't like loose ends. He must have called you, didn't he?" I didn't answer. The silence between us stretched taut. "I told you to leave this alone," she continued. "But you couldn't. You had to be righteous, just like your father." I placed the bag on the table. "You killed him, didn't you?" Her lips twitched. "Don't be dramatic. He was dying already. I just didn't stop it." I felt the world tilt. Rage, grief, disbelief, all collapsing into something cold and clear. "He trusted you." "He trusted no one," she snapped. He was ready to burn this family down out of guilt for mistakes he made decades ago. He would have left us with nothing. You already had nothing, I said quietly. You just didn't realize it. She stood, the firelight catching the pearl earrings that glimmered like little ghosts. You think exposing me will fix anything? Those men don't care who you are. Once you go public, they'll come for you too. Maybe, I said, but at least it'll be over. I unzipped the bag, took out the flash drive, and tossed it into the fire. The plastic cracked, then curled into molten ash. Her face went pale. What are you doing? Ending it, I said. No police, no courts, no leverage. They can't use this anymore. Neither can you. She lunged toward the hearth, but I stepped between her and the flames. You always mistook control for safety, I said. Dad knew that. That's why he left everything to me, to stop you from turning his name into a brand. Her expression hardened into something I'd seen my whole life, disappointment. You're just like him, she whispered. A coward hiding behind ideals. Maybe, I said, but at least I can sleep at night. The storm outside roared louder, wind pushing rain through the cracks of the window frames. Mom backed away, breathing hard, her eyes never leaving the fire. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, You think this ends here? They'll come looking. You'll have nothing left. I started with nothing, I said, and walked past her. The air outside was electric and wild, rain soaking through my clothes as I made my way toward the ash tree behind the dock, the place where all of this had begun. The lake churned black under the stormlight, waves breaking against the old wood. I tossed the remaining papers into the water, watching them dissolve and sink. When I turned back, the cabin's windows flickered brighter. A moment later, a sound like thunder cracked through the air. Fire. Real this time, consuming, merciless, cleansing. Whether she'd started it or it had caught from the hearth, I didn't know. I didn't go back to check. I stood in the rain until the orange glow turned to smoke. By morning, there was nothing left but wet ash, the smell of cedar and silence. Dad had been right. The only way to end the lie was to burn it down. 3 months later, I signed the deed transferring the cabin land into conservation trust. No inheritance, no empire, just peace. For the first time, the legacy didn't belong to anyone, it belonged to itself.